Hello, my name is Joe, and welcome to my channel, Joe's Book and Movie Corner. Today we are going to talk about Star Trek: The Next Generation, Imzadi by Peter David. If you're only here for the first 30 seconds and you're about to tune out, ask yourself, is this book overrated? We're going to talk about it. This is my weekly reading report. I'm going to go over books that I read last week. This video is coming a little bit late. This is my second attempt at this video. I'll also talk about something that I'm currently reading, and I'll go over a movie that I watched. Since this is a broad array of books and topics, I will go ahead and put timestamps down in the description if you just want to jump ahead. So if you just want to jump ahead to the good stuff, you're certainly able to. But let's actually talk about a movie. So I watched one movie last week, and it was 2018's The Meg. This is kind of a big giant shark monster movie. If you've never seen it, it's essentially a big budget version of movies you used to see on the Sci-Fi Channel or straight to video movies. Normally, I don't really like films like this, but in the past couple years, I've gotten into Godzilla. Of course, that's also big monsters, and I like those movies. And another thing that I did like about this was that there's kind of a Lost World aspect. And recently, with some of my earlier Rocket Summer and kind of my pulp fantasy sci-fi adventure books that I'm interested in now, there's always very often, there's a Lost World element. Usually in those books, there's like a lost civilization. In The Meg, that there is no lost civilization. But the story is that this group of scientists, they think that the Marianas Trench actually goes deeper than what is previously thought. And there's this layer of... There's basically a barrier that holds down warmer water, and they send a submarine down, they break through this layer, and then there's this whole world in the Marianas Trench that's teeming with life. There's a giant megalodon that's living down there, and when they break back up through the barrier, it creates an upward stream of warm water that allows the megalodon to go back up to the surface. So it has this Lost World exploration aspect to it. Recently, I've read The Lost World by Arthur Conan Doyle. I've read a book we're going to talk about, A Princess of Mars. It kind of has a Lost World element to it. Also, I've read recently Abraham Merritt's The Moon Pool, which has a Lost World element to it as well. So it kind of fits in line with what my interests are right now. It's a co-Chinese production, so it's kind of an international movie. With foreign movies that have English-speaking roles, or with international productions. Sometimes the acting and line reading is a little awkward, so don't expect good acting when you go watch this movie. But yeah, I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. So let's start talking about books. What am I currently reading? Currently, and I've mentioned this before, I'm still very slowly reading The Odyssey by Homer, translated by Robert Fagles. I'm enjoying it now. I'm enjoying it this past week much more than when I started the book. I've finally gotten into kind of the meat of the story where Odysseus is explaining his adventures, and I just read about the Cyclops, and that was a lot of fun. So I don't have much more to say about it now. I'm slowly going through it. It's going to take me at least another month to finish it, maybe even more. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it a lot better now. Now, let's talk about Private Eye July. This is a BookTube event created by Jim at Mystery and Mayhem. And in July, unfortunately, this event got stuck on the back burner. I was reading Star Trek books. I was reading sci-fi for Rocket Summer, created by Michael K. Vaughan. And I was also reading books for Jane Austen July. And those three events I prioritized over Private Eye July. I do like mystery fiction and crime fiction, just not as much as sci-fi and Jane Austen. But I did read the first story in this collection. This is the Continental Op. It's a short story collection by Dashiell Hammett, and I read The 10th Clew. It was okay. It's about a murder that has a series of clues, and then there's the 10th clue implies that maybe there's more going on to this murder than at first glance, and can we trust the rest of these clues, or are they all kind of like red herrings or leading us off into a different direction? The story was okay. but it was this a BookTube event, even though I didn't really participate in it. It's a reminder that I do want to read more Dashiell Hammett. So I would like to finish this collection at some point. I'd also like to read Red Harvest by Dashiell Hammett. But yeah. So that was it for Private Eye July. Next up, I have a book. This is something I'm reading for a segment I am calling Books I Should Have Read in High School. This is, of course, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. I don't read a lot of plays. This is not a novel. It's a stage play. And I was very impressed by this. When I was in high school, I think the only stage plays that I read were Shakespeare and I think Raisin in the Sun is a play, if I'm not mistaken, and I liked that. But I didn't really read much else. What surprised me about this, first of all, it's a very sad story. It's about a father, Willie Loman. He is a salesman that's entering the end of his career. He's suffering from, I don't know if it's mental stress or possibly even dementia, but he's starting to have visions about the past. He has two sons, Happy Loman and Biff Loman. Happy Loman he's an executive in New York. He kind of reminds me of a 40s version of a yuppie. And then his son, Biff Loman, is just kind of a guy that can't hold down a job. He has these romantic visions of owning a ranch out west, but he's kind of a bum. And he wasn't really encouraged to focus on his studies when he was in high school. And it's a very sad story. I'm reading it because I want to better understand the references in Seinfeld. When George is looking for a job, Jerry always calls him Biff. I find George, honestly, more pathetic than Biff Loman. At least Biff Loman has this romantic idea about owning a ranch. George really doesn't have anything like that. But as I was saying, what impressed me so much about it was, obviously the story was very good. It was very emotionally engaging, but the stage directions and the lighting directions that are written into this are really good. You can see the play in your head. And though I haven't read many plays, Shakespeare, at least from my memory, did not have stuff like that. And there's scenes where Willie Loman is kind of drifting in and out of reality, and he starts having visions of people from his past. And it just seamlessly goes into these dream sequences. It was really, really good. I highly recommend this. I definitely want to read more Arthur Miller. And I think I just want to read more plays in general. It was just kind of a quick read. I took 2 nights to read it, but you could easily read it in one sitting. But yeah, I want to read more plays. Next up, this is a holdover from Rocket Summer. I had wanted to read... I was thinking about reading a Jack Vance novel in what I was going to call the 5th week of July and just do another 1960s novel, but I didn't get to that. I actually wanted to go back to something from my pre-1930 TBR. I had this big, huge TBR for all this science fiction. There was no way I was ever going to get to it all. But this book has been burning a hole on my Kindle for a while. It is A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And I liked this quite a bit. It was fast. It was punchy. The pacing was really good. It was written originally in 1912. I think it was published as a novel in 1917. You could tell that it was... written in the teens. The first few chapters were written in this quasi-epistolary style. It's not written as letters, but they feel almost like journal entries. If you're unfamiliar with the story, this Civil War veteran, John Carter, he's... in the first couple chapters, it's basically a Western. He's working out west, and he gets into some trouble with these Apache Indians. And he's kind of holed up in a cave, and he has this out-of-body experience. First of all, he's also immortal. The book starts with him stating that I've basically been living forever, and that's unexplained. And he's holed up in this cave, and he looks up at the planet Mars in the sky, and then he's suddenly transported to this planet. So you're not sure if he's actually transported. You're not sure how he's transported. Is it another dimension? Is this all a dream? Why is he immortal? And this is not explained at all, but But that's not a problem. The book is still really, really good. It's very entertaining. In the first few chapters, so when he gets to Mars, there's a few different Martian species. There's the green Martians, there's the red Martians. They're all in conflict with one another and within themselves. He can't speak their language, and in the beginning, it's before dialogue is introduced, before he learns their language. It's written in, as I mentioned, in this quasi-epistolary style where it feels like it could have been written as letters. And you can imagine John Carter sitting down and just telling you the story. So, for example, in a modern book, if there's two characters that don't speak the same language, you could very easily have, this alien green Martian character just, Edgar Rice Burroughs maybe would have written out the language. He would have written out gibberish, and it would have been much more dialogue heavy. This is written in 1912, so it's not doing that. And when the dialogue does start, there's a greater tendency to characters to speak sometimes in a little bit longer monologues than a modern style. So my point is that modern readers might find the writing dated is the wrong word. Dated is very negative, but I think it can show a little. The writing itself shows a little bit of its age. There's also, I wouldn't call this book. I wouldn't say that this book has purple prose, but it does have maybe elevated vocabulary compared to something that's a little bit more modern. So every once in a while, I'm reading this on my Kindle, so I had to check the definition of some words. Other than that, though, the pacing is really well. Once the dialogue starts and he learns the language, the pacing really speeds up. And there's, if you're a fan of the Star Wars movie Return of the Jedi, and if you like the Tatooine scenes with Jabba the Hutt's barges, there's a lot of stuff like that in A Princess of Mars. And they have these little fighters that they fly around, and there's these big, huge battleships that float on Mars. It was really cool. I definitely want to read more of this series, the Barsoom series. I don't know when I'm going to read the next book, and I'm hoping that this series is going to be more episodic in nature. I've been reading, it's been a while since I've read the last book, but I've been reading Dungeon Crawler Carl, and one thing that I'm realizing about modern fantasy and modern sci-fi series is that very often each novel is not really a novel. It feels more like just a really long chapter. So instead of reading a 500-page book, you're just reading a 500-page chapter, and the series is thousands of pages long, and are these books like Dungeon Crawler Carl, are they good enough to justify that huge length? I'm not so sure. Also, another problem with highly serialized series are that if you take any time off, if you say you take a month or two off from reading the series, it's difficult trying to jump back in because the next book starts just immediately where the last one left off. So I'm hoping that the Barsoom series, I'd also like to read the Tarzan series. I'm hoping that once they get going, after the first couple books, they become a little more episodic. So you can, take a break after reading one, and you won't be lost when you jump back in. But let's go ahead now and start talking about the featured book here. This is, of course, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Imzadi by Peter David. And I read this not only for BookTrek, but also as a group reads in a group created or started by Brandy at the Bookeclectics. So thanks to Brandy for setting up the buddy group reads. And overall, this was an entertaining book. I enjoyed reading it. If you go onto either Trek BBS, the Trek Lit forum there, or the Trek Books subreddit, very often you will see this book recommended as some of the very best of Trek fiction. And though it was entertaining, I think it was quite overrated. There's something in the final act, which is otherwise very good and very well paced. There's something in the final act that I had a huge, huge problem with, and it really bothered me. So I've talked about this in my last video. What this book is about, it's of the numbered era, but it reads more like what they used to call giant novels. It doesn't have that giant novel branding, But the story is a little bit broader than what you would normally see in a Star Trek episode or a Star Trek numbered book. But it starts out in the future. Admiral Riker and Commodore Data are characters. The Guardian of Forever plays a part. And you find out that at some point, Admiral Riker is an admiral on Space Station 86. It's kind of like a Deep Space Nine backwater station. His career kind of took a nosedive after the death of Deanna Troi, and that happened at some point during their time on the Enterprise D. So at some point during the run of the TV show. We briefly go back. We see the death of Deanna. Not much, no one knows how she died. It's a total mystery, and Riker is just depressed for the next 40 years. And then we go back in time on Beta Z, and we see how Riker and Deanna Troi first meet and how they fall in love. And then later on in the book, obviously, the problem is Deanna dies. There's time travel involved, so somehow future Admiral Riker, maybe Commodore Data, are going to go back in time and work with the TNG crew to stop this death. The middle section of the book is the romantic section. And that's where I left off last time in my last video. And I mentioned that I feel like those chapters were a little bit bloated. They went on for a little bit too long. And the romance was very... I don't read a lot of YA, but it strikes me as young adult writing. It strikes me as very juvenile. It doesn't help that last week I also read Northanger Abbey, which was a book that I loved. I thought it was great, written by Jane Austen. And this was just, it felt very young adult, felt very YA. Felt like it was written by a 14-year-old for 14-year-olds. And those chapters just kind of went on too long. Okay. Once we get towards kind of the climax of the book, and I'm going to try not to spoil it too much for right now. You know that there's time travel going to be involved. Once the final act starts, and they're trying to stop the murder of Deanna Troi, the pacing is very good. There's some comedic moments that I think work really well with Lieutenant Barclay. Some people might not like that comedy, but I really did. I thought it was great. The action was great. The pacing was really good. It was a page-turner, except that the motivation behind a character's actions and the motivation that drove a lot of the conflict was, in my opinion, offensive as a Star Trek fan. And so other than that, though it was very entertaining, it just kind of ruined it for me. I thought, in general, characters throughout the book sometimes didn't act quite like themselves, but there was one character at the end of the book that was just, there's no way that this character would have done this. I don't believe it. They try to justify it a little bit, but it's absurd knowing this character. So I do want to talk about what this thing is. So spoiler alert, I'm about to spoil the whole end of the book. So if you haven't read this book, I mean, it's a classic in Trek literature, so it's worth checking out, and it is entertaining. It's just, and I will say before I spoil what it is, I've looked at the Trek BBS forum, I've looked at Trek books. Everyone recommends this book. Some people criticize it for some of the actions of Riker in the past. There's some lines and actions that don't quite line up with modern 2025 sensibilities, and I was thinking, who cares about that? There's this other glaring issue that no one online talks about, and it was driving me kind of nuts. So I do want to reveal what it is. So spoiler alert, if you want to cut out now and you haven't read the book, we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. But here it is, spoilers. So the issue that I had was when Admiral Riker and Commodore Data, they're in the future, and Data reveals to Riker that, hey, there's this alternate timeline where I've looked into the Guardian of Forever, and in an alternate timeline, Deanna Troi doesn't die. And so Riker goes, wait a minute. Riker realizes that someone must have gone back in time, murdered Deanna Troi to alter the future. It's a common thing that's in Star Trek, and usually in Star Trek, if someone has altered the time stream, well, we got to go fix it and correct it. Data and you're not expecting that. There's kind of a subversion. It subverts what you're expecting. You're expecting Data to go, well, let's go back in time and I'll help you. And that would be really satisfying. You see them work together, go back in time. Without disrupting the past, they try to fix it. Except Data goes, well, we can't do that because how do we know that we can't prove that someone changed the time stream. So we can't muck with the timeline. Okay. Riker decides to go back in time anyway. Data tries to stop him. He's unsuccessful. Riker goes back and alone to the Enterprise D, to try to save Deanna. Data goes back. Commodore Data goes back to try to stop Riker. Already I'm like, I don't like this. I want to see my heroes working together. Riker stops the assassination attempt. But unfortunately, Commodore Data now, who's disguised as Data, who at some point incapacitates Commander Data and takes his uniform and disguises himself as Commander Data. He logics his way into, well, I have to protect the future, so I am going to murder Deanna Troi, one of my close friends. I'm going to murder her. And the action that follows is really good and really tense, and there's a lot of comedic moments with Lieutenant Barclay as Lieutenant Barclay sees Admiral Riker and he sees Commander Data, then Commodore Data, disguised as Commander Data. And Riker is trying to stop Commodore Data. And at a certain point, so obviously this is a problem. I mean, Peter David has Commodore Data go back in time and writes him essentially as the Terminator. Data is trying to kill one of his friends, Deanna Troi. That's a problem. Now, as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, surely the alien, so there's this alien race, and you notice the villains aren't even really the main antagonist in the end. This alien race from that were around when Riker and Troi were young on Beta Z. They're the real villains. They're the ones that have mucked with the timeline and are trying to kill Deanna Troi. It really doesn't matter that much. You're thinking that, okay, somehow Commodore Data has been compromised in some way. He's somehow been brought into the plot and he's not himself. Nope. And they're not. He's not compromised. He's just decided to align himself with the villains to protect this future. Okay, maybe something has happened in the 40 years since he was on the Enterprise to change him in some drastic way. Nope. He's the same person. In fact, Peter David goes out of his way multiple times to mention that Data, he looks the same. He's unchanged. The point is that he repeats many times that Commodore Data is the same person as Commander Data. And in fact, that's reinforced by the fact that when Admiral Riker, when he is back in time and he's getting Commander Data to help him, he has to lie to Commander Data. And he has to lie and tell him that the alternate Data, it's not you, it's Lore. Because he's afraid that if he reveals that it's you from the future trying to kill Deanna Troi, Commander Data is going to go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to help him kill my friend. I mean, if we are so afraid of Data just turning into a murder bot, why does he have a commission in Starfleet? Like this? No, he would not do that. Commander Data would not kill one of his friends. And Commodore Data in the future would not do it either. So eventually they stop him, and Peter David tries to justify it in two ways. He has Deanna Troi at the end go, wow, Commander Data, or Commodore Data from the future, who's the same person, was trying to kill me. But I get the logic. He was trying to protect the stuff. No. Maybe Commodore Data would have tried to stop Riker, but he would not have outright tried to kill Deanna Troi. That's insane. And then at the end, when Riker and Data, the future versions, go back to the future, you know, they're having they're sitting around, they're slapping each other in the back, and they go, wow, that was a crazy adventure. And Data kind of offhand says, well, you know, I couldn't quite go through with the murder. I should have been able to accomplish this. Maybe something inside me stopped me. No! I'm sorry. He would not have come up with that plan. And then Riker just goes, well, yeah, you know, you should have broken the rules and you should have realized what was really important. No, he would have been way more angry. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And it bothers me that everyone recommends this book and no one on any Trek Lit forum, or at least that I can tell, calls out the fact that Data, who's not compromised, who hasn't changed in any significant way, is able to turn into the Terminator. If he's able to do that, why do we trust Data with anything? Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about it. So that's all for this week. Next week, I have something I have read for Garbogust. I will probably read some. I've definitely read some more Star Trek. I might have some other science fiction for you next week. But that is all for now. Thank you.